We've got the greatest in here right now. We've got Bret the Hitman Hart on the line with us here on Woo Nation at Play.it. And I guess we should just go ahead and address the elephant in the room. In years past, Bret, you've been critical of some of Ric's matches, and I realize everybody's getting along these days, so I don't really want to stir it up, so to speak. But how do you think you guys' philosophies differ towards wrestling, or what makes a good match, and how did you guys just see things differently through the years?
And you can say whatever you want to say, and we'll still be text buddies.
Is a little bit taken out of context, I think, a little bit. What I would say is that we just have sort of just overlapping eras. You know, his era and my era just are very close. I mean, I was a guy that, like he said, when he was talking about Randy, you know, I could always go in the ring and call a match out there. I didn't need to even plan anything. Like zero, I'd go out and do an hour match with Ric. I don't think without ever talking to him before we went out. And I could do that with Ric at any given time. At the same time, I was also part of the Dynamite Kid and a different generation that was going a lot faster and doing a lot more sort of intricate new high spots that weren't sort of the same ones that, because there was a period of time, you know, through the Dory Funk era and even the Harley era, a lot of guys just worked like them. A lot of them, people that just took the same bumps, the same style, that basically had the same match Harley had before he went out. And that was just a style that everyone picked up. It was a good, safe style, but it was, when I thought in the 80s, early 80s, that in Calgary, that we started being a little more creative with actual working, where it was a little stiffer, a little more believable. Dynamite was an incredible wrestler that long before he ever got to WWE, the stuff he was doing here in Calgary was ahead of its time. And so I learned from some good guys a little more of a different style, which I think, I didn't have the pleasure of working with just American wrestlers like, say, Ric worked with a lot of American guys, the best workers in the States, where I worked with guys in England and worked with Japanese guys and Puerto Ricans and a lot of different styles and stuff like that. And I just think that when my time came, after Ric's time was sort of still wrestling, the way they call it in there. They figure it out on the fly, and that's what makes that's the genius of those days. And I knew that from Harley, and I actually started as that era was changing a little bit. And I think, I don't know, maybe I was a pioneer or something with Dynamite and some of these guys that started taking wrestling in a little bit of a different direction and picking up the speed. And, I always say that when the Bulldogs came to the WWE, for example, in 84, I think it was, or 85, everybody started working harder, and that's just the way the style changed. And I think the business got better after that. I think it just was the natural, path that the wrestling was going to take, and wrestling kind of upped a little bit after in the 80s. And I'm sure Ric's got his own thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm the first to admit, when you wrestle an hour every night, which I did for 10 years, you get into a routine, and you hope that the guy you're working with is just a little bit over. Because sometimes if it's not, it could be a long hour.
Well, in fairness, too, a lot of that, when you were doing those hour matches, weren't on cable every week. So it's not like the same people are seeing the same match every week.
No, but
you do it in Greensboro.
The boys are seeing it.
Right.
And I think that I'm the first to admit. But I didn't have the blessing of a Ricky Steamboat or a Barry Windham every night. You know what I mean? And Harley would let me lead the match, but I wrestled Harley's match. Dory would let me lead the match, after a while, but I wrestled Dory's match. Terry Funk, he'd let me lead after a while when he was comfortable, but I wrestled Terry's match. Terry, of course, became so innovative in his own style. I mean, I bet you feel the same way, Bret. Terry Funk and Dick Murdoch were way ahead of their time, man, where they could be such serious technical guys. But Murdoch could make people laugh, too, way before anybody else could. I mean, he'd take a bump over the top rope in St. Louis when nobody was doing anything and walk into the turnbuckle and knock himself out. I mean, nobody did that. I think in Murdoch, at the same time, Murdoch could get in the ring, and technically there weren't too many guys as good as Dick Murdoch. Would you agree, Brett?
Oh, he was a real pro.
Jesus.
He was one of those kind of guys that you loved him in the ring and you loved him out of the ring. He was a hilarious character outside the ring.
Oh, tremendous to be with.
Very funny. Had a dry sense of humor. Sarcastic. He was a very funny. You could have followed him around all day and always had a laugh with him.
Yeah, I did. For 3 years. And then I got rid of him when he came to the Carolinas, the redneck. But he was, God, I tell you, Murdoch, he had his style too, but everything he did, from the stomp, turning your face sideways and stomping you in the head, to his punches, everything he did looked phenomenal. I mean, you can't pick apart any of his stuff. And but at the same time,
he could do a knee drop off the top rope that looked unbelievable.
Exactly, and he's one of the few guys.
20 feet in the air.
He's one of the few guys you'd take it from too. Him and Ray.
Yeah, you don't even have to move. You just know that he was always a safe. Safety was always Dick Murdoch's priority. I don't remember him ever being even stiff, but just a super player to work with every night.
Yeah, no, and the thing too is that if you think about it, this is a guy that he was like Ray Stevens. He never went to the gym, never worked out. I mean, Harley never went to the gym, never worked out. I mean, these guys, where Bret and I are in this era where cosmetics are everything. I mean, I'm wrestling Kerry Von Erich one night, Steamboat the next. I mean, help me out, right?
Right.
Then along comes Luger, right? And all the Von Erich boys, with the exception of David, were built, like crazy. And then got Luger, and then here comes the Road Warriors. I mean, the cosmetic thing kind of turned it around for all of us, I mean, you have to admit, Brett, I mean, you and I, you more so than me, but, we were not exactly the cosmetic poster boys that some of these guys were. Kerry Von Erich just, he was, the most phenomenally genetically gifted guy I think I've ever seen. His genetics were phenomenal. I'm sure he had some help along the way, but it didn't matter. He looked like $1 million. And then Luger and then Steamboat. And I mean, a lot of the guys just had great physiques.